Have you ever felt it? That quiet, sinking feeling that you're playing a game, but you were never given a rule book. It happens in the office, during a promotion you were perfect for, when it inexplicably goes to someone else. It happens in social circles, where you watch people with half your talent and a fraction of your integrity effortlessly glide upwards, commanding respect and attention while you seem to be stuck in place. It's the feeling of being a pawn on a chessboard, moved by invisible hands, subject to forces you can't quite name, but can definitely feel. You follow the explicit rules, work hard, be honest, be a team player, and yet you're consistently outmaneuvered. It's a profoundly disorienting and frustrating experience, because it suggests the world doesn't operate on the principles we were told it does. We are taught that life is a meritocracy, a place where the best ideas, the hardest work, and the purest intentions will always win. But our lived experience whispers a different, more unsettling truth, that there's a silent, invisible architecture of power shaping every human interaction, and that ignorance of its design is a guarantee of failure. This gap between the world as we wish it were and the world as it is creates a constant, low-grade anxiety for millions. It's the nagging question that keeps us up at night. Why, despite all my efforts, am I not getting ahead? A writer and classicist named Robert Greene found himself consumed by this very question. He wasn't a CEO or a politician. He was a man adrift in a sea of seemingly random professional disappointments, and he became obsessed not just with the question, but with the brutal, historical, and unvarnished answer. This is not just the story of a book. It is the story of a quest to decode the hidden operating system of human ambition, a journey into the heart of power itself. The journey to understand this hidden world began not in a library or university, but in the trenches of everyday life, through a long and bewildering series of failures. Before Robert Greene wrote a single word about power, he lived a life that was, by almost any conventional measure, a profound lack of it. Over the course of 2 decades, he worked an estimated 80 different jobs. He was a construction worker in Greece, a hotel clerk in Paris, a tour guide in Dublin, an English teacher in Barcelona, and even a deckhand on a ferry in the Aegean Sea. He drifted through Europe, absorbing languages and cultures, but failing to find a foothold anywhere. He eventually landed in Hollywood, a place that serves as a high-octane laboratory for human ambition and betrayal. There, he worked as a screenwriter and story developer, and it was in the shark-infested waters of the film industry that the patterns he had vaguely sensed his whole life came into sharp, undeniable focus. He saw brilliant writers, directors, and artists, people with immense, undeniable talent, get systematically chewed up and spit out by the system. He watched as their projects were stolen, their ideas co-opted, and their careers sabotaged by people who were less talented but far more skilled in the art of manipulation. He witnessed firsthand how charm could be weaponized, how a carefully placed rumor could destroy a reputation, and how feigned friendship was the most common currency of the realm. Every day was a masterclass in the subtle, brutal dynamics of power. The explicit conversation in the meeting room was a complete fiction. The real decisions were being made through whispers in hallways, through strategic alliances forged over lunch, and through calculated betrayals that were never spoken of again. Greene himself was a victim of these dynamics. He felt powerless, a perpetual outsider looking in, watching the game with a growing sense of horror and fascination. His frustration reached a breaking point. It wasn't just about his own lack of success. It was the intellectual and existential offense of it all. Why did the world work this way? Why were the unspoken rules so much more important than the spoken ones? It was a crisis born not of a single event, but 1,000 tiny cuts, a slow accumulation of evidence that the map he had been given for navigating the world was not just wrong. It was a deliberate deception. He felt that he, and everyone else who played by the official rules, was being set up to fail. This deep, personal frustration became the furnace for an obsession. He threw himself into history, devouring the biographies of the greatest figures the world had ever known. Conquerors, courtesans, politicians, and con artists. He wasn't looking for inspiration. He was looking for a code, a set of recurring strategies that the most powerful people in history had used to bend reality to their will. He was a man without power, desperately trying to understand its nature, not become a tyrant, but simply to stop being a victim. His first major breakthrough came not from a story of triumphant victory, but from a spectacular, almost theatrical, Fall from Grace. It was a story of Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister to the young king, Louis XIV of France in the 17th century. Fouquet was a man of brilliance, charm, and impeccable taste. He was also incredibly wealthy, and he wanted the entire world to know it. In 1661, to celebrate the completion of his magnificent chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte, he decided to throw a party so lavish it would be the talk of Europe. And it was. The greatest minds of the age were involved. The architect Lavoie, the painter Lebrun, the landscape designer Lenotre. On the night of the party, guests, including the young King Louis himself, wandered through gardens illuminated by thousands of candles, past fountains that seemed to dance in the moonlight. They were treated to a new play written for the occasion by Molière, and were served a feast prepared by the legendary Chef Vadel. The climax of the evening was a breathtaking fireworks display, followed by the distribution of party favors. For the most distinguished female guests, a diamond. The party was an unprecedented success. But as Fouquet basked in the glow of his triumph, he failed to notice the cold, simmering rage in the eyes of his most important guest. Louis XIV was not impressed. He was insulted. This chateau, this party, this display of wealth and taste was far grander than anything the young king himself possessed. In that moment, Fouquet hadn't just entertained his king. He had inadvertently, fatally outshone him. He had made his master feel small, insecure, and second-rate. 3 weeks later, Louis XIV had Fouquet arrested on trumped-up charges of treason. His assets were seized, and he was thrown into the darkest dungeon in France, where he would spend the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement. The king then hired the very same artists and architects who built Fouquet's chateau and put them to work on a new, far grander project, the Palace of Versailles. He learned from Fouquet's mistake. He would create a spectacle so vast and magnificent that no one could ever hope to rival it. From this single brutal story, Greene extracted his very first principle: never outshine the master. He realized that power is a deeply insecure and fragile thing. Those in positions of authority need to feel secure, superior, and brilliant. If you, in your eagerness to please or to show off your own talents, make them feel otherwise, they will not thank you. They will crush you. This insight connected directly back to the universal problem. It explained so many of the baffling injustices of the modern workplace. It was a talented junior executive who presents an idea so brilliant it makes their boss look unimaginative, and then finds their career mysteriously stalled. It was a skilled employee who fixes a problem so efficiently that it highlights the incompetence of their manager, only to be labeled not a team player in their next performance review. Greene understood that the world of the 17th century French court and the world of the 21st century open plan office were governed by the same primal human emotions: vanity, insecurity, and fear. The first law wasn't about being mediocre. It was a profound lesson in strategy. It was about making your superior shine, and in doing so, making yourself indispensable and invisible, a source of their success rather than a threat to it. It was the first key to unlocking the hidden rule book. But as Greene delved deeper, he uncovered a complication, a dangerous paradox. If you follow the first law too rigidly, if you become too adept at making yourself small and never outshining the master, you risk another kind of political death: invisibility. By playing defense perfectly, you cease to be a player at all. You become part of the furniture, reliable and ignored, passed over for opportunities, because you become so good at not drawing attention to yourself. This was the trap of the passive courtier. You could avoid being struck down by lightning from above, but you would never be able to climb the mountain yourself. True power, he began to realize, required not just a good defense, but a subtle, carefully disguised offense. This led him to a deeper, more nuanced truth, a second core principle that acted as a necessary counterbalance to the first. He found its ultimate expression in the life of Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, who unified Germany in the 19th century. Bismarck faced a seemingly impossible task: to unite dozens of bickering German states into a single, powerful empire, all while surrounded by hostile European powers like France, Austria, and Russia. A direct approach was doomed to fail. Had he announced his grand ambition from the start, he would have been instantly isolated and defeated by a coalition of his terrified neighbors. So he did the opposite. He concealed his true intentions behind a dizzying array of smokescreens. To the outside world, he presented himself as a bluff, honest country squire, a man who loved his dogs and his estate more than politics. He publicly championed peace while privately plotting for war. He would provoke his enemies into attacking him, allowing him to rally the German states behind him in a defensive war he had engineered from the start. A master of this was his handling of the EMS dispatch, a telegram detailing a diplomatic encounter between the Prussian king and the French ambassador. Bismarck edited the telegram, not by lying, but by selectively removing words to make the exchange sound far more insulting and abrupt than it actually was. He then leaked this edited version to the press. The French, their national pride wounded, furiously declared war, exactly as Bismarck had planned. He appeared to be the victim of French aggression, when in fact he was the architect of the entire conflict. From this and countless other examples, Greene formulated another critical law: conceal your intentions. This was the active principle to complement the passive one. It wasn't about lying necessarily, but about misdirection. It was about never letting people know what you are really after until it is too late for them to do anything about it. This principle illuminated another whole category of human interaction. It was a negotiator who talks endlessly about a minor clause in a contract to exhaust their opponent's attention, only to slip their real, crucial demand through at the very end. It was a political candidate who adopted a moderate, non-committal stance on most issues to avoid alienating any single group, masking a far more radical agenda they intend to implement once in office. The world Greene saw was full of people operating behind masks, using decoy objectives and false sincerity as tools of the trade. Understanding this was not about becoming a duplicitous monster. It was about recognizing the strategy when it was used against you. It was realizing that people's stated reasons for their actions are almost never their real reasons. Power required you to read the subtext, to look past the theatrical gestures and the noble-sounding words, and to decipher the silent, hidden currents of self-interest that were actually driving the action. As Greene continued his historical immersion, collating these strategies, one about defense, another about offense, one about deference, another about deception, he began to sense a deeper pattern, a unifying theory that tied all these disparate laws together. The first principle, never outshine the master, was a rule for surviving in a hierarchy. The second, conceal your intentions, was a rule for achieving a specific goal. But what was the underlying reality, the grand stage upon which all of these dramas were playing out? The aha moment, the grand synthesis of his research, was a profound and unsettling realization. The modern world, for all its talk of transparency, equality, and meritocracy, is still fundamentally a court. The structure of power has not changed since the days of Louis XIV or Queen Elizabeth I. It has merely changed its costume. The royal court, with its intricate hierarchies, its gossip, its shifting alliances, its fawning sycophants, and its dangerous schemers, was not a relic of the past. It was a perfect microcosm of the modern corporation, the political party, the university department, and even the local social scene. In a meritocracy, you're judged solely on the quality of your work. Your accomplishments speak for themselves. In a court, however, your success depends not just on your work, but on your ability to navigate a complex web of social relationships. Appearances are everything. How you make people feel is often more important than what you actually do. Directness is seen as crude and offensive. Indirection, elegance, and charm are the keys to advancement. This was the unifying idea that made sense of everything. Never outshine the master is quintessential court strategy. You are managing the fragile ego of your sovereign. Conceal your intentions is the art of the courtier who must advance their own agenda without appearing ambitious or threatening to others. He realized that laws like win through your actions, never through argument, and court attention at all costs were not just cynical tips. They were survival instructions for a courtly environment where open conflict is disastrous and being ignored is a form of death. This grand idea fundamentally reframes the original problem. The reason we feel like pawns playing a game without the rules is because we think we are on a factory floor when we are actually in a masquerade ball. We think our hard work is the only variable that matters, while failing to see that the real game is one of perception, influence, and social intelligence. The frustration we feel is the friction between the meritocratic myth we are sold and the courtly reality we inhabit. Greene's synthesis was that power has its own ecology, its own immutable laws, just like physics. You can choose to ignore them. You can lament their existence. You can believe they are immoral, but you cannot wish them away. They will operate on you, whether you are aware of them or not. The only way to stop being a pawn is to finally accept the nature of the board and to begin, at last, to understand the game. So we have journeyed from that universal feeling of confusion and powerlessness to the frustrating wilderness of Robert Greene's own early career, to the discovery of a foundational defensive principle in the court of Louis XIV and a deeper offensive strategy in the machinations of Bismarck. And finally, we arrive at the grand, unifying revelation that we are all courtiers in a modern court, whether we know it or not. The ultimate blueprint this journey offers is not a license for ruthless manipulation, but a call for radical awareness. It is a guide to becoming an astute observer of human nature, starting with your own. The first and most critical step is to stop judging and start observing. Watch people. Listen not just to what they say, but to what they don't say. Notice who gets promoted and why. Analyze the mistakes of those who fall from favor. Treat your life and your career as a grand text to be deciphered. This book is not about changing your character. It's about understanding the character of the world you operate in. You can still be a good and decent person, but with the profound strategic advantage of knowing the terrain. You can choose to use this knowledge defensively, to protect yourself and your work from the political games of others. You can use it to advance a noble cause, navigating the treacherous waters of power to achieve something great. The choice is yours, but what is no longer an option, if you wish to have agency in your own life, is ignorance. Understanding is the first step, but true transformation comes from applying that understanding. The journey doesn't end with this story. It begins with a new way of seeing the world. If you are ready to stop being a pawn and start being a player, to learn the unspoken rules, so you can finally write your own, then commit to that journey. Join a community of people dedicated to this kind of deep learning and self-mastery by subscribing to this channel. See it not as a click, but as a conscious decision to invest in your own awareness. For in the end, the greatest power of all is not the ability to control others, but the clarity to finally see the board for what it is.